Hello, and welcome to a demonstration of CyberArk's Endpoint Privilege Manager threat protection features. In this session, I'm going to cover a couple of different features that we consider compensating layers or other types of ways we mitigate risk on the endpoint, aside from implementing least privilege. The first one I'm going to cover is around our credential theft blocking. Essentially, the way this works is we're preventing access to those known credential stores and known different types of credential theft behavior. The second one is around our ransomware protection. I'm going to show you how we're able to effectively block ransomware from attacks being carried out on the endpoint. Within this, we're essentially going to be allowing only certain applications to access content, which we call content handlers. And last, I'm going to show our privilege deception, how we can detect insider threats and prevent access to those types of kind of honeypot type actions, if you will. To go a step further, let's look at how we can prevent credential theft blocking. Essentially, what we're doing in this type of operation is we're only allowing those known applications to access those credential stores. So for example, your browsers, IT tools, remote control tools, the different parts of Windows operating systems such as the LSAS process. We're allowing only those executables that are allowed to access those stores. Anything that's not one of those approved applications will be prevented from accessing those. For our ransomware protection, essentially, like I mentioned earlier, we're allowing only approved content handlers from accessing those different types of content files, such as text files, PDFs, documents, etc. Anything that's not an approved content handler, such as any undefined apps, scripts, or other child processes that are not specifically outlined, will not be able to access those different types of content files. So without further ado, let's look at a demonstration of how this works. So in looking at this desktop, let's go through a couple of different types of threat protection we can protect against. First, I'm going to go through a browser credential theft attack. So what I'm going to run here is a script that accesses an application called Lasagna. It's a very common tool used by threat actors to collect different types of credentials from different things. And this one is looking at all of the browsers on my device. And within less than a second, I was able to grab some key credentials from my device and have them uploaded to a remote server. So this is what it looks like without our threat protection on. Now let's go look and see what happens whenever we go and enable this. Now that I'm in my Endpoint Privilege Manager admin interface, let's go down here to protect against lateral and vertical movement. And right now I have it set to detect. So I can detect any type of those events and they'll show up in my threat protection inbox. So if there are any kind of attacks being carried out, I'll know about them here. I can exclude certain operations from happening. Let's say, for example, a backup application needs to be touching these files in order to be able to back them up. You could exclude those different types of processes and allow them to do that. Anything else would be considered not an approved application to access those files. So let's switch this from detect to block. I'll go ahead and click yes. Now that I have the protection enabled, let's go and try and carry out our attack again. I'm going to run my script. And it was able to find no credentials. And that's because we prevented access from Lasagna being able to access those credential stores because it's not an approved application. This is a very easy feature to enable and can be done very quickly and easily to be rolled out. I want to come back to the interface here and show the different types of stores we can protect against. So I want to go back into my settings here. Here's all the different browsers we can protect against, such as Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Edge. We can also prevent cookie theft as well. We have lots of other types of things we protect against, different kind of IT applications such as FileZilla, KeePass, PuTTY, etc. There's also remote application tools such as LogMeIn, OpenVPN, TeamViewer, WinSCP. And there's other types of things we protect against too, not just stores. But we can also detect against registry dumps. We can detect suspicious things such as booting into safe mode, debug mode. We can prevent, again, like we mentioned earlier in the presentation, the LSAS credential harvesting, pass the hash attacks, and SAM hash harvesting as well. And these can all be enabled individually, or you can turn them all on to detect or block. So it's very customizable. Let's go back to the next piece here, which is our ransomware. So I'm back over here in my workstation again. Now that we've gone through the credential theft piece, let's look and see what happens when we run out of ransomware attack. Now, for the sake of time, this application takes a little while to run, but this is a freeware application that runs 21 different types of ransomware type attack scenarios. And essentially what it does is it gets a list of some CSV files, and it goes and tries and runs these different types of attacks on those particular CSV files, and then gives you the results to see which ones you were affected by. Now I'm going to go ahead and click check now on this. And again, this takes about 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to pause the video while this runs through all these, and you'll see that all of them will be vulnerable to it because we currently do not have ransomware protection on. Now that the attacks are almost done, you notice all of them show vulnerable or executed, meaning that they were vulnerable basically. So we can see that if a ransomware tool had been ran on this, there's multiple types of attacks that could have been vulnerable on this device. Now let's go look and see what we run this with the ransomware protection on. So I'm going to go back into my interface, and let's go and turn that back on from detect to restrict. Now to go over some of the settings we have in here, I'm going to show those here. So let me go ahead and get it enabled because it does take a few minutes to enable on the endpoint device. I want to show you some of the settings that we have available for this. In here, you have options around what types of file names and locations you'd like to prevent the types of access to from the authorized applications, which to see which applications there is a link right here to show you what applications are authorized to make changes to these directories or these file types. So all of your major ones are going to be in here, documents from Word, PowerPoint type things, Adobe type products, picture files, things like that, email type documents, video files. They're all going to be listed in here. You can also give a dialog of what can show whenever it happens. For the sake of our demo, I'll go ahead and just set it to a balloon instead of a window, and I'll show you what that's going to look like right here. Down here's where you can scope to see what machines you want to target this at. By default, it's going to target everybody because obviously we want to protect every machine against ransomware. But this is a useful feature if you want to be able to test this on a select group of machines first. And these are also some options you can set for what kind of registry keys you want to disable changes to. So now we're going to go back to our workstation, and let's go ahead and try and carry out our attack again and see what happens. So again, for the sake of time, I'm going to click check now. And actually we can already start to see there are things being blocked. And again, I'll go ahead and pause this and we'll let this run, and you'll get to see that all the attacks were blocked. All right, and now that our test has completed, we can see that nothing was able to execute. None of these scenarios were vulnerable. Everything was prevented from running, so nothing was available to run from this. And that's because those files are not allowed to access those types of things. For the privileged session demo, I'm going to show you a couple ways that we look at access to this account. Now let's just say I wanted to go and try and change the password for that account. Now by default, standard users don't have that ability. But let's say I found some kind of zero-day attack and I was able to get past some of those things. It could be a myriad of things, right? So we can see there's an account called CyberArk Backup Admin that we have pushed down. And I'll show you the configuration where we assign that. I'm going to go to that user account, and let's just say I want to try and set the password for that. I'll click OK, and let me just make up a password to put in here. And as you notice, it says backup is denied. Now I could also go and try and log in as that account. So let's sign out as John. And let's say I was trying to brute force my way into finding the password and I wanted to log in. Let's just go see what happens when I try and log in as that account as well. So not able to log in as that account, not able to access it. But now let's just say I attempted to, I didn't really access that account, but I attempted to access it with those. If I look over here in my inbox, I'm going to see that there was some LSAS credential lures used. So I can actually see if these were actually attacks that had happened. And that's the idea behind the privilege deceptions. There's accounts that are being attempted to be accessed by this feature, then we'll be able to alert you or even block access to those accounts. And I can show you where we go and edit this feature here. So I can turn on the credential lures here, for LSAS lures. So I can see right here, that's the name of the account that it used. You can change this to whatever you like. And you can make it as generic as you want to make it not look as obvious. You can do them for browsers as well. That was actually one of the ones we fished out earlier with Lasagna as a get credential. So I'm actually detect those types of browser lures as well. Again, to wrap up, our Endpoint Privilege Manager comes with lots of different features and functionalities that address a lot of those foundational weaknesses we see on endpoint protection. First and foremost being that least privilege implementation, being able to provide just selective elevation for certain types of process and applications based on somebody's role. The thing we focused on mainly today was around our privilege defense. And that was around, I showed how we could prevent credential theft blocking. I showed how we could protect against ransomware attacks using a myriad of different types of ransomware attacks. We also showed how we can create a privilege deception accounts both for browsers and for accounts on your Windows devices and alert or block access to those. If you have any further questions, please let us know. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration and have a wonderful day.